Hey y'all, welcome to Trevino's Black Glove Confidential. Today we start the brisket series, and part one of that series is going to be taking a brisket from your grocery store, trimming it, applying a binder, seasoning, and making it look like this. So stick with us today for about 10 or 15 minutes and we'll show you how we did it. Okay, like all our other videos, first things first, we're going to go over our supplies list. What do we need to trim and apply binder and rub to a brisket? This one's pretty simple. Get a bowl for your trimming, a trimming knife. You can either use a fine edge trimming knife like this or a butcher knife like this. I typically use this 90% of the time, but honestly, I don't have a sharpener at the house, kind of a fail on my part. So I've got this just in case because I know it's a lot sharper. Cutting board, pro tip on the cutting board, we use red so that we just keep our raw meat separated from our finished product and from our vegetables. But also if you look under, I've got a damp paper towel, and that's going to keep my cutting board from moving around because we're going to have a big piece of meat on there and we don't want the cutting board doing circles while we're flipping and moving it around to get to the different cut areas. We're going to use our brisket rub. This is the one that has less pepper than the rib rub, higher salt content. We're going to use the bark builder. It's just our 16 mesh black pepper. Finally going to see how we use that. Mustard as a binder. Gloves to keep your hands clean. And you need a brisket. So here's the other pro tip. Where is my brisket? It's in the freezer. I put it in there about 30 minutes ago. Let me get it out and I'll show you why. So you don't want it frozen, still want it pliable, but it makes all this fat right here, especially this soft feathery stuff that you'll get on some briskets, makes it a little bit harder. And a harder fat is easier to cut. Once you start getting feathery to where you're having to lift and do little cuts like that, that's where you're going to start gashing. So if you find yourself doing that because you can't get the knife to go through, which we'll go over in the trimming video, the next section, then your brisket's probably too warm and you need to put it in the fridge or throw it in the freezer for about 30 minutes and let it harden up on that fat side. Okay, so we got all our ingredients listed. You've got everything you need. Next step, we're going to show you guys how to trim this brisket. All right, so trim cam is initiated. What we have here is a USDA Prime Black Angus brisket from, goodness, I don't even know. Oh, HEB. Prime one, it's a good Angus packer. This is what I would go with and consider ideal. If all you've got is choice at your grocery store, go with the choice. If it's on sale at Kroger, go with the choice. If select is your only option, that's fine, but what you're gonna find is you're gonna get a very lean flat that even if you break it down right, it's gonna be delicious, but not quite as juicy. It might not have as much sheen. What we're looking for in a brisket is, at the store at least, are a few things. Just quick little pro tips over here. One, your edges, you want to have them both. This is a little thinner, this is a little thicker, but they're both good thickness, and you can see that right there. If you get one where right over here it is just flimsy, like less than 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch, look for a different brisket because you're going to end up cutting all that off anyway because it's just going to fold up on you or fishtail and burn. Okay. Another thing we're looking for, across the top right here, I don't want to see any gashes. So if I see any gashes in this brisket that were done by accident at the butcher or the packing plant, I'm going to get another brisket. The reason being is when you have a gash on the top, it's going to happen while you're trimming and it's not the end of the world, so push forward. But every one you do, you'll get a lot of juice as it breaks through the stall that'll pull up in there and come up through because the fat's not there to kind of hold it in. So you'll end up with these little wet spots that'll rub some of your bark off. But that's pretty much what I'm looking for. I want a good general shape. I've heard about folding it. I mean, I haven't noticed much difference. I like to see some fat right here, intermuscular fat on some of the streaks in the flat bottom side, but that's pretty much it. You know, I'm looking for a good thickness on both sides. I'm looking for no gashes across the top and a decent overall shape that I can work with. I'm gonna try to break this down to as few cuts as possible so you guys have a very good and easy thought process when doing this. We'll also tab each one of these cuts so that you can kind of go through them one by one along with the video while you're trimming. First thing, this is our presentation side. This is our fat side up. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna flip this over. This is where we're gonna make our cut out of the package. I got all this great meat right over here, right? This decal, this is the hard fat. If you feel it right there, that's coming out anyway. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut right here, and that's where I'm gonna pop my bag. Just gonna take everything out. If you get juice everywhere, that's fine. Ain't gonna hurt anything. And I've got a trash can underneath me, which you'll see. All right, so our first cut is gonna be this, your decal. We're gonna cut this down to a good flat. It's actually pretty well trimmed as it is. There's two trains of thought on this. Some guys like to cut it out completely. Some guys like to leave a bit in there. I like to leave a little bit in there. If you choose to cut it out completely, more power to you. I just prefer to cut it out when I'm actually serving the brisket. So I'm gonna go in here with my knife, and you'll see how hard I'm working with this knife. This is why I like my butcher knife. So I'm gonna come in here, I'm gonna make a big cut right there. I'm gonna chunk that out of the way, and that's a good decal cut right there. Now, I'm looking at this bottom area and I see all this feathery stuff, right? I'm gonna cut as much of this off as possible. Now, with it is gonna come some meat, and that's okay. But what you're gonna see is I'm gonna go with the grain. So you see your grains going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm gonna cut this way, and as I'm cutting, I'm gonna keep my knife at an upward angle so that this non-sharp part is consistently making contact so that I'm not digging into the meat, that I'm coming up. I am gonna take meat with this, and I'm okay with that because more than anything, I wanna create a nice, clean, flat surface. So I'm gonna start in here, a little sawing action, and take that first piece out just like that. And I'm gonna come right in over here, little sawing action, put that just like that. I'm gonna go over here to this edge, take that off right there, come right here, take that off right there. You still got a little bit of feather right there. I'm okay with that. That doesn't bother me. And if I wanted to get real concise about it, I'll come in here and cut a little of this fat out and lower this ridge just to create more of a flat zone. But for the backyard, I'm gonna consider this good. So our first two cuts were 1, decal, 2, all this little silver skin across the back, okay? Now we're gonna go to cut number 3. This is where we're gonna expose on the decal side, this corner edge right here. I'm gonna take a strip about right here, and you're gonna say, man, that's a lot of meat. It is, but there's a lot of fat right here too. And I'm gonna use this meat for a sausage in a further video, and what that's gonna do, let me show you. I'm gonna make this straight cut, I'm gonna get in there, I'm gonna pull. You see how a lot of this is fat? Most of it. I'm gonna cut this meat out, and I'm gonna go ahead and use that for sausage and some of the fat. But none of this is gonna render, and it's not gonna leave a smooth edge. It's gonna be nasty. Also, the other thing it's gonna do is, see, now I have a straight shot across this side of the brisket with where my fat is. If I'm going 1/4 inch, which is about right there, 1/4 to 1/2, then that tells me I got lots of trimming to do right in this area. So that reference is gonna come in really good later. Now here on the back end, I see this chunk of fat right there. I'm gonna get rid of that, and that's just me being me. Don't really find it would be super necessary, but I like to shape things a little bit. Okay, and then we're gonna go right here. We're gonna edge that right there. So this was our third cut. our third cut was on the decal side, straight across, about 1/4 inch in. We cut all the way down to expose the line of fat and the meat, and we're good on this side right now. So what I'm gonna do is we're gonna flip it. Oh, look at that bad boy right there. This is the mohawk of all mohawks. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna get rid of it. So one thing I want you to see on the top side, this is your decal that we cut out. And we're gonna flip it over here. On this side, there's another hard chunk. It's another decal. So sometimes I've seen briskets where guys get confused and you'll see them cut on this side and they'll think that they're cutting the mohawk. It's on the wrong side. So whether you have a left or right-handed facing brisket, a good little tip is wherever this decal is, your mohawk's on the opposite, no matter what. So this is gonna be our 4th cut. We're gonna cut the mohawk down. I'm telling you right now, you're gonna say, man, you're cutting a lot off this brisket. I am. It's just how I choose to present them. I know the meat's gonna go somewhere else. If you don't wanna cut this whole thing down, it's totally fine. Just cut it, let's say you don't wanna take it all the way down. Just start right here, and you could stop right there. And then you're gonna shape it and all that, right? But you still have this hard thing right here. And that's what I wanna get rid of. I don't like that decal. You see some of those slices of point brisket, and they got this big chunk of fat that hasn't rendered. That's what you're seeing right there. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come back down with my knife, and I'm gonna make the cut I would make, which you'll notice my knife is angled down so that I'm angling down away from the brisket, and I'm not going this way to go into it. And I'm cutting this down, and what I'm doing is I'm working my way into this hard decal, just like that. This meat's gonna get separated and put into the sausage mix. Kind of flip this around so you can see it. So that little hard decal right there, now that guy's gone. And now all I gotta do is shape it. So this will be cut 5. So now I'm pulling this over here. Gonna come around my edge. Now the reason I'm cutting this big chunk of meat off is because anything sticking out like that in the back of a brisket, it's gonna burn. And I would rather, in a restaurant setting, I can make more money selling that as a sausage than cutting burnt meat off a brisket and hoping that it'll make the chop bend. So this mohawk cut was pretty aggressive, but I'm okay with it. You can see you got a little fat right there. Trim that down a little bit if you want. Decently rounded edge. That side's done. Okay. Now the last cut, I'm going to take it around. I'm going to go on my deckled trim side. And remember earlier where we made that cut and we exposed all of this, this is the thick side of the fat in your brisket. One thing I will tell you guys, rarely do I trim the fat from the top on this side of a brisket because it's already been trimmed and it's already pretty low and it's always at about 1/4 inch. When you're trying to trim the fat on the mohawk side of the brisket, that's where you're gonna end up making a lot of gashes. So what I typically tend to do is I will come down this way on the opposite side where it's thicker, use my guideline that I established with that 2nd or 3rd cut, and I'll go across the top and I'll trim. See that feathery fat? Even being in the freezer, it's still a little tricky to cut through. If that's close to the room temperature, I'm gonna have a lot of trouble getting through it. Now I'm kind of just doing that. And all we're doing is we're just bringing this little side down, that extra fat that we saw in the beginning. Just bringing it down to about 1/4 inch, give or take. So we create a nice even bite. You also want it nice and soft. I still feel it's a little hard right there. So I'm going to come over the top right here. Get a good little cut. It's still kind of hard right there. So I'm going to come in right over here. Take a little more off. And now we're starting to get into a good, soft, pillowy fat. And that's what I like. So I got a little bit over a 1/4 inch right there, but I'm okay with that. Got that. Now I just got to do some final shaping. Same over here. Got a little thin area right there, but all the fat's pretty good for me. So we're going to do our final shape cuts. This will be our last two. We'll come right across here. I'm going to cut this edge. Most of that's fat coming off. Little meat right there. Okay. I'm going to flatten her out. And this is where you'll see guys that are going to come in and make this beautiful little angle right there. And that's what we're going to do. So we're going to come this way. I'm not a masterful artist when it comes to this. I just create like swipes in a diagonal angle based on my line. So I did a little line with my knife. I'm making diagonal swipes. And then I'm going in with my knife and I'm rounding those little edges that I left behind. Turning it into a nice little curve. Right here on this edge, rounding this off to a nice curve. So what I'm going to guess here is I've probably got about, oh, don't roast me for this, I've probably got about 3 to 5 pounds of trim right there, which brought this brisket from, I think it was probably 12. Well, I'll tell you right now. It was 11.65 pounds. Now I've probably got about a 9 pound brisket, 8.5 to 9 pound brisket, which for me is perfect. I got good pillowy fat right there. It's nice and soft. I got good round edges. If you look on this side, got a nice little layer of fat around the edge, not too thick. Mohawk isn't the prettiest one I've ever done, but it'll work perfectly fine, and I'm going to put seasoning over it anyway. It's the only exposed meat that's going to sweat, which back here it seems to not be as bad as down here. But I made it a point to not have any gashes on my flat. That's really important. You want to try not to gash down here. So remember, where it's thin, you don't have to. I never touched this area right here with a knife. Everything came off on this side right there. Okay, well, come back in just a second. I'll show you guys how to apply a rub. Okay, let's put some rub on this bad boy. So, like everything else, we're using mustard as our binder. What we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead, throw some mustard on the bottom, make a lot of noise doing it. Sorry. There we go. Not going too heavy with it, just like with the other meats, just a nice coating. Get some on my hands. I'm gonna go around the edges, get around this back edge. I'm gonna flip it over, and just so I don't have to do this step twice, I'm gonna put this on everything. There we go. Going around this back side right here on the point. All right. Okay, so we're good to go. You know, I just realized that when I was talking about brisket earlier, I didn't go over this, so I'm gonna go over it right now. This is your point, this is your flat. These are your fatty parts, this is your leaner part, right? So when we do slicing later, I'm gonna show you guys a diagram, but we're basically gonna slice this way across the grain, turn this part forward, and then cut it that way across the grain. That's gonna get us our smokehouse type brisket cuts. But for now, we're gonna apply some rub to this bad boy. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my Trevinos brisket rub, and we're gonna run the car wash sequence, right? So we're gonna start back an inch from right over here. I'm gonna go this way, and I'm gonna apply one good pass of the rub to the bottom of the brisket. And that's it. Bottom of the brisket, it's there for a bite. You could honestly just put salt down here, but I do the rub because I've got it made anyway. But you don't wanna waste a lot of rub on there. You don't wanna waste a lot of pepper on there, mainly because it's expensive. And you're not going to see this, and you're going to taste it a little bit, but really the beefier flavor is going to be tasted on the top side. So there we go. You notice I'm going kind of heavy with this. This is a very big piece of meat. There we go. So I'm gonna go in here. I'm gonna pat this nice and neat, just like so. Get it in there. There we are. I'm gonna lift it up, shake the excess, put it down. Okay, now you finally get to see what I call the bark builder step, which is literally just putting pepper around the sides, and then we're gonna put a nice coat of pepper across the top. It's gonna be a very light base coat, because remember, we've already got a 1-to-1 ratio in our rub. We're gonna add a little bit more pepper because I found it helps me adhere a bark better. But first I'm gonna do the edges. So I'm gonna lift up the front, and I'm gonna do nice pepper right across the front. I'm gonna lift up my edge, and I'm going nice and light with the pepper on the side, just like patting it in. Lifting up this edge, getting some pepper on the side, just like that. It's right over there. Lifting up this back edge, getting the pepper just like that, patting her in. Coming up on this side, going on that, and lifting up this back side, going right in there. Now, I don't put anything else on the sides, so I'm not going to go back over and do my rub. It's just something I've always done. I feel like it leaves a great little bark on the sides, and I'm going to have plenty of salt across the top. Now, we're gonna do a light base coat of pepper across the top. Real light, real fast, just like that. There we go. Do a little bit more there, because we got that feathery fat. I'm gonna hold that down just like that. All right, we are done with this bark builder. Now we're going back to our rub, and we're gonna do a double pass heavy from front to back, back to front. And that's it. Notice how we're shaking with the shaker facing down to make sure all that paprika, garlic, salt, and Lowry's gets in there with the pepper. Okay, so now we're gonna do nice pats right here. Looks a little bit light right over there. I'm gonna hit it right there. Get a nice pat right there. Pat around my edges. Obviously, if I'm doing a bunch of these, I'm doing them quicker, but for demonstration purposes, kind of taking a very slow, methodical approach to it. Looks like it's heavy, but I promise you, it's not. Now we're gonna take this, shake off the excess, put it right over there, and our brisket is ready to go. Okay, so you guys are all expert trimmers and seasoning appliers to brisket now, and that's awesome. What we have here is our finished product, right? This is great looking. We got a nice cornered edge. We've got it flattened on the mohawk. We got our rub around the sides and around the top. We put our pepper base on there. I'm really happy about this. Where this is going for me is in the fridge. I'm gonna put this on a cookie sheet, and please put it in a cookie sheet with edges, because if not, you'll get some of that juice run off, and then your wife won't be very happy with you, or your husband won't be very happy with you. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take this and put it in the fridge, and it's gonna stay overnight. I'm gonna pull it out in the morning about 2 hours before we start the cook, and let it come up to room temperature before I put it on the pit. If you don't have that kind of timeline, you can take it out an hour before the cook. So it's personal preference. If you wanna put this on the pit right now, totally fine as well. Here's a quick difference, a couple tips I've noticed about doing it one way or the other. If I let this sit in the fridge overnight, that pepper's gonna adhere really nice. It's gonna dry out the top end just a little bit after it sweats it. That salt is gonna disappear, make its way into the fat. Your finished product's not gonna have as sharp of a salty bite, but it will have more complexity and flavor as you eat through it. Now, if you put it on right now, it will have a sharper salt bite. Not in a bad way, it'll just be a little more dominating than it would if you leave it overnight. I prefer the more subtle approach where all the flavors are complex, and if you think of an equalizer on a stereo, right? You've got your, your factory settings across the middle. That's how I like to get a brisket. I want my salt, my pepper, my meat, and my smoke all across the middle. I don't want anything sticking out more than the other, because I find that that's the best way to serve a final product. So again, this is gonna go on a cookie sheet. It's gonna go in our fridge. uncovered overnight, and you're going to take it out in the morning and get your cook started. We'll see you back here on Trevino's Black Glove Confidential when it's time to cook this bad boy. You guys have a great weekend.